who is the head of Legal and Regulatory Affairs for Airtel Mobile Commerce Uganda Limited, which is Airtel Money, where she has been active in championing fairness and a level playing field in national payment system space. She has chaired the Legal Review Committee, which was tasked with reviewing the national payment systems laws to ensure a fairer legal regime for the actors. Welcome, Susan. Next, I'll invite probably the only non-lawyer on the team, and that is Lamek Mike Sonko, who is the Wealth and Retail Banking Chief Operations Officer and Head of Onboarding at Standard Chartered Bank, Uganda, the oldest commercial bank in the country, where he is responsible for overseeing the retail business at Standard Chartered Bank, Uganda. Welcome, Lamek. And last, but by no means least, is Joseph Edmond Kalinachi, and he is the Corporate Legal Advisor. He's an academician, a litigator, and currently Senior Manager, Legal and Regulatory Affairs at the National Social Security Fund. He handles all the legal aspects of contracts, regulatory compliance, and corporate governance. And before joining the fund, he served in the Attorney General's chambers as state attorney, and he's also taught law at the Uganda Christian University for over a decade. Please put your hands together for him. So colleagues, we have a great topic ahead of us, and just to lay ground for what's coming, the digital era as we know it is not something that started yesterday, but historically began in the mid-20th, moving on to the mid-21st or early 21st century, and is known as the third industrial revolution, the information age, computer age, new media age. And it's really been evolutionary, and in Uganda, especially more recently post-COVID, is where we have seen how we have adopted and embraced digital aspects. But of course, it's a great opportunity, but like with all opportunities, there are challenges. And some sectors in Uganda have suffered more than others. More recently, the mobile telcos and the banks have been victims of cyber and fraud risk. And we thought that it would be an apt topic for us to discuss how to manage the crisis that arise when you are attacked by these fraudsters. And I don't want to tell you how much banks have lost, but banks have lost colossal sums over the last 2 years, and this is a really apt discussion for us to understand how we as in-house counsel who are charged with advising our internal customers can keep abreast with what we need to do. Now, before we start, I want to understand from our audience, both online and physically, which kind of entities are represented here, by a show of hands. The manufacturing sector? Manufacturing. FMCG, that's fast-moving consumer goods. Banking and financial services. Okay, we have quite a few hands. We also have in-house counsel serving government entities. Let's see by a show of hands. Okay, that's good. That really gives a good picture for the panelists as they break down information to know how to share it with you. So first up, I'll start with you, Joseph. And we've seen that there are advanced fraud detection and prevention tools in place. So would like you to unveil for us some of these sophisticated tools and methodologies for early detection and prevention of fraud within different settings, whether corporate or otherwise, and just share with us your views on that. So over to you, Joseph.
Sure, we all have an idea of what fraud is. The legal definition is a bit specific, but we can simply say it is a perversion of truth to the detriment of another person and for material gain to the person who is diverting the truth. So it is important, first of all, to contextualize the environment in which the fraud is occurring. And looking at many of the examples where we have seen digital fraud and other kinds of fraud occurring, you realize that these are institutions that are holding large data sets. You have, for example, personal information, identifying information. You have financial information. You have, for example, in the business sector, you have logs of goods, for example. You have catalogs and so on. So a person who is intending to defraud you will first of all study your environment and understand it. In the financial sector, they will understand that this person actually deals with money. And so if I want to target them, I have to first of all scan the environment. Then secondly, you need to understand basically the conditions for the occurrence of fraud. There are basically two theories that have been raised. There is what they call the fraud triangle, and recently what they call the fraud diamond theory. The fraud triangle is basically looking at three conditions. First of all, it is looking at the motivation to commit fraud. What are some of those factors that will lead a person to commit a particular kind of fraud? It could be, for example, financial pressures. The person could be having problems, loans, and so on. It could also be revenge. A person wants to, maybe something was done, maybe the person appeared before a disciplinary committee and they want to get back to the institution. And then it could also be that actually this person, maybe they are not looking for revenge or anything like that, but they just want to try out something, especially in this new generation where you have these young people who want to try out everything in one way or the other. The person might just be trying out something in order to commit that fraud. So there is what they call motivation or pressure as the first corner of the fraud triangle. And then the other, you have to look at the opportunity. Does this person have the opportunity to commit the fraud? Is the person in such a position that they can actually commit the fraud? Usually you look at people who have information about the company, very deep information about the company. They understand maybe the strategy of the company. They understand certain things that, how certain things work out in the company, and so on. Then rationalization being the third element. This is a kind of justification. After all, if I do it, it won't hurt anyone. The company has insurance. So they try to make it look like even if they did it, it won't actually be a very big problem. So they try to kind of create a justification. Then when you look at the diamond theory, it also adds the element of opportunity. The element of capability. The person should be in such a position that they are able to actually do it. The person might be a senior, a highly ranking person in the organization who can actually press the button. It could be an IT person, for example, who has knowledge of how systems work, a person who can overlap those systems, and they can do many things that cannot be easily seen. And the problem, since we are dealing with detection and then prevention, the problem is that when it comes to detection, it means the fraud has already occurred. But what we are trying to do is to minimize the impact. So how do you do the early detection of fraud, especially in the digital era? One of the things that are necessary is to look at behavior. So behavioral analytics is very important. Sometime back, I undertook a transaction on my mobile phone from a certain bank. Sorry. I undertook a transaction on my mobile phone from a certain bank. I was withdrawing money. And a minute later, I get a call from someone saying they are from the bank. And then they say, we want to confirm whether it is you who has withdrawn this amount of money. And I'm like, yeah? Like, we have noticed that you always withdraw the money from the ATM. But how come this time you have decided to use a mobile phone? So there's that kind of behavioral analytics. So you look at your customers, see how they behave. Have they changed their behavior in a way? It could be that a person is undertaking mobile banking. Are they changing login locations? For example, if you look at their usual behavior, are they changing the login locations? Of course, it could be that the person has traveled out of the country and they need to undertake a certain transaction, but it should be of concern to you that how come this person this time is actually using maybe a different computer and so on, and the IT people can actually identify the kind of machine that you are using and where exactly this is happening. So where there are certain changes, you need to be concerned. And also, there could be, for example, changes in spending patterns. A person usually uses their card or they use their mobile banking to buy certain things. Then all of a sudden, maybe it is not Christmas, but you see them doing a lot of purchases. So you get concerned, what really is happening? So you need to really observe these behaviors. Then there could be what they call anomaly detection. You need to establish a baseline of what constitutes normal behavior. What do you think constitutes normal behavior? And then you can use those advanced tools to detect deviations from normal behavior. If I am a person who always makes withdrawals, okay, the peak of my withdrawals is always from the 15th to the 20th of the month, and then you realize there is a change, you should be concerned. What is happening? Why is it that this person now has started making withdrawals? The peak has now shifted to the beginning of the month and so on. So you're not being intrusive as such, but you're being concerned what really is happening. Then you can use data analytics. There are a number of tools that can sift through your data to look for those unusual patterns of things that have happened. For some of you who have listened to the things that have been happening at our organization, I think you heard about the case of Uganda versus Joseph Soka. This is a person who had the opportunity to access the suspense account. This is where you have money that is unallocated because there could be problems with the data. Maybe there's one name assigned to a particular employee and so on. So you have this person actually accessing that kind of data. I'm talking about this because it was actually handled in the courts and the person was convicted. So it is a public record. It's not something secret. So when you look at the suspense account and realize there are certain things that are being done by a particular individual, you'll get concerned. What is really happening? There is a trend that is coming up here. So that should be of real concern to you. Then you also need to look at instances of real-time transaction monitoring. There are instances where a person is logging into their account and then you realize that they are consistently putting the wrong password. So there should be a limit to the number of passwords. So you monitor what is happening on this particular account. The person puts in a wrong password, puts in the wrong password again, and so on. that should actually trigger you to know that there is something wrong with this particular person. So I know that in most companies, they will limit the number of times when you can try a password. And then after that, of course, the account will be locked. And then you'll have to ask for a new password where they will take you through several types of authentication before you can actually get a new password. So that can actually help you to promptly identify suspicious activities and trigger responses, quick responses. But it is also important that you share fraud intelligence with other organizations. If you're in the banking sector, you have the Uganda Bankers Association, you need to update everyone on what is happening because this is a whole sector. What is hitting one person is likely to hit another person. So you need to have this kind of fraud intelligence shared among the different sector players. So other ways you can detect this is, for example, if there have been attacks or someone is attempting to attack you, they will send suspicious links, for example, in emails, which they will ask you to click. Sometimes they will redirect you to certain websites. The IT people say there is a difference between websites that have HTTP and those ones that have HTTPS. Then there are also websites where you'll find a padlock. Sometimes the padlock will be locked and sometimes the padlock will be open. So when you look at those kinds of websites, when you are keen, you realize that there are instances where the security has actually gone down. That can actually help you to know that someone is actually trying to get into your institution. And they will always look for the weakest link. For example, when they attack one of your people, they'll want to get as much data as they can from that person. So what they will do is they might send some kind of malware, they might send these suspicious emails, they might do virus attacks and so on. Sometimes they want to take over the computer. There are certain software programs that can be installed on your computer and they can track the keystrokes. So when you are logging into a website, the person has already installed this program. When you do the Z, the hash, and so on, the person is actually recording that. So that becomes a very big problem for people because this person will log into your accounts after recording your keystrokes and so on, and then they'll use that to get into all other aspects of life. And especially where you have particular people who have mandate to do particular things, if they attack that person, then you'll start realizing that there are certain things that are happening in the organization that are a deviation from the norm. So
yeah, thank you very much, Joseph. I know we can sit here. You're very obviously very passionate about this topic, and but I think we'll have some more time to listen in. We're breaking down what fraud is, and then the different tools that we can have in place to prevent or to detect fraud. Now, one thing you mentioned is that when it comes to detection, it means that the fraud has already occurred. So I want us to now move on to Lamek and ask him, of course, when fraud has occurred, there's a crisis. A crisis arises naturally. So I'd like you, Lamek, to share with us elements of effective crisis management and how we can build resilience during such periods and have some frameworks that we can work with to manage the risk that has occurred. Thank you. I'll just give you 5 minutes for that.
After all the intrusion and what, the next thing is crisis. And I want us to, let's broaden our minds from just an intrusion into the system. And to just understand this concept, lean against the COVID crisis that happened, which affected everyone, because these fundamentals don't only relate to a fraud, but just relate to any crisis that can happen anywhere, to broaden our mind. So, number one, when a crisis happens, and we've seen very many people running in different directions, everyone running here, questions being asked. However, if it is a company that has, or an organization that has tried to put its house in order, you must have a crisis management framework in place. And the crisis management framework has very many aspects that surround it. Number one, as an organization, however big or small, even a home, you must have a crisis management framework. As I speak this, just go back to the day we were all glued to our televisions, and the big man said, therefore. If you all remember that word, therefore. For those of us who were in cars driving home, we had to stop at a supermarket to get supplies. For companies that are where people don't go with laptops home, you had to find out how to go. So if your crisis management framework was not working then, you had a problem. Number one, in your crisis management framework, do you have a crisis management plan? What do you do when we face a problem? Do you have a crisis management team? This team should have, usually it has the top management of the organization, people with level heads, people who will not buckle down after lots of pressure, because crises come with pressure. And if you don't have tested people, you get the head of the company crying, and when the head cries, everybody will start crying and everything will become a mess. So if you have this all played out, and this done prior, in preparation for anything that can go wrong, so you have the kinds of business continuity plans. Have you done your BIS, the business impact assessments? If anything were to go wrong, how badly can we be affected? So when all this is in place, you're just ready for anything to happen. So come the time that a crisis happens, what do? Assess. Assessment of the gravity. How bad is it? Now, it is the assessment that will lead to the next step of the response. And in the response, that's when you trigger all that you prepared before. Your crisis management programs, your crisis management team, now all of these people come into play. And then it even comes into the resource management or resource mobilization. You see, when COVID came, speaking for where I work, this is something that we saw on the horizon coming. How prepared everyone was is another question. But you had people we had to do logistically prepared. People had to have laptops, we have to have routers, because at any time, because we saw what was coming from other countries, people were being told to stay home. So ultimately, everybody was going to start staying home. But work had to continue. So that feeds back into your business continuity plans. Did you do the dry runs very well? Did you put aside maybe other channels of work? Just go back to COVID, when the gentleman said, therefore, no leaving home tomorrow. And visualize what happened wherever you work. Did you have your laptop with you? Did you have data? For the service providers of different, for your business, people who had to do transport, was there enough transport? And things like that. So, after all these have been invoked and the resources have been mobilized, then you begin the response. Of course, in the response, there is communication, which is very key in crisis management. Who communicates? When do they communicate? What do they communicate? How do they communicate? And to who? If everybody in a company is meant to talk about a crisis, trust me, it can break the company down. So this is all embedded in your crisis management framework and the crisis management plan, which is managed by the crisis management team. When all that is done, the response is done. So what do? The recovery. If you've embedded very strict and very well choreographed business continuity plans, the recovery is going to be very easy because you have avenues of putting aside, maybe you have other channels of work as you put the wrong right. And it won't take time. Even the gravity of the matter or the effect will not be so much. Yes, there's disruption, but because you prepared. But most importantly, after all the recovery and everything, you have to do an evaluation. Those are all, I hope everyone is following as these events chronologically follow each other. The evaluation, because in the evaluation, that's when we start asking the questions. What happened? What went wrong? What were we supposed to do? What are we supposed to put in place? Because if something happens to you today, it might be a mistake. But if it happens the second time and it causes the same problems, it means you never learned anything from what has happened before. So it's important. And then this will cause you to amend your crisis management plans accordingly after the lessons learned from this occurrence. I believe if you have all those mastered, then crisis management can be as less painful as it can be. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you very much, Lamek. Communication to the wrong party, the timing of the communication can either make or break any entity in a crisis situation. I'll now move on to Alan, who I'll ask to just share with us the importance of stringent regulatory compliance in mitigating risk and the risk of fraud and effectively managing a crisis. Over to you, Alan.
Thank you. Thank you for starting with Joseph and Lamek. Am I right? You're always called in to put out a fire somewhere. But also, if you draft a contract, if you're looking at policy, you're also very key when it comes to ensuring that controls are in place, ensuring that things are done right. So you are also a fraud preventer. And some say you're even the conscience of the company. So whenever you see that there's a gap somewhere, you always try and plug it. So I think this room is probably one of the most important rooms when it comes to fraud prevention and crisis management. In Umeme, for instance, whenever we're drafting a notice, they make sure the lawyers in the room, Susan probably is the one who will draft all those things. They call her the owner of the English in the company. So the lawyers are always seen as wordsmiths. They're always seen as the people who will determine whether one word can be added or removed for some reason. I don't know why everyone else thinks we own the English. So now when it comes to an entity that is heavily regulated, I'll speak about Umeme. Umeme's job is to collect for the entire sector. So when you pay your bill, the money is going to be used for generators, the transmission company, and the distribution sector. And our regulator is also funded through there. So whenever there is fraud, like Joseph had said, most people are looking to benefit, and quite a number of people are just looking to make some money off it. So you'll have, I'm sure you saw something in the papers about people selling fake tokens. So by defrauding the company, they're defrauding you. So you will find that maybe they've found a way of cloning your meter, or they're in the system, or someone inside has probably taken some money. Now, as a lawyer, it's our job to ensure that we prevent that through making sure that policies are in place. If someone is caught, they're prosecuted. I'm sure some lawyers in here do the prosecution themselves. And the company is protected from that fraud. Now, regulatory compliance comes from ensuring that if you have a regulator, that you're doing your work in accordance with the law, any licenses you have, and best practice. And we have to be accountable to the regulator. So I'd like to add to what Joseph and Lamik said, and said an issue of accountability and transparency. Once you have accountability and transparency, chances are you will have very little fraud, or even, try and, hopefully it's utopian, but have no fraud. So if you sanitize your processes by making sure everything can be seen, then you'll be able to fight the fraud. So as part of our role is, one, check that people are following the law, ensure that the contracts that are signed are complied with to the letter, so you advise the business, and then where there's a need to correct something, the lawyers come in to give advice on best practice, what the law says, and how we can resolve it, because essentially we're all problem solvers in our role. So in a regulated environment, the effect of fraud in electricity sector, for instance, the effect of fraud is an increase in electricity prices, unsafe installations. We've had people die because they're trying to steal power and they get electrocuted. So it's a matter of life and death, and it's also a question of our economy. Some people will commit fraud to steal. Some people will commit fraud to maybe cripple the economy. We had towers fall and cut off quite a bit of the country because some people wanted to steal the towers to sell the scrap. So sometimes the effect of fraud is not just on the company, but it can affect the whole economy. So our job as lawyers is to ensure that, one, the law is followed, two, the company is protected from the adverse effects of, like Joseph said, someone perverting the truth to the company's detriment and your nation's detriment as well, and for their own benefit. And then we get involved in detection, of course, communication. I'm sure every crisis committee has one of you on it. And then lastly, remedying it by ensuring that you've taken enough action to detect, apprehend, and hopefully prosecute whoever is involved. So in my day-to-day, I get involved in, I get called to crises that I really have never climbed a pole. I do not know much about restoring electricity, but I'm on all those committees where they're saying power is out in this place. What can we do? So I probably do more work writing notices than fixing meters, but I find that my role is needed. So I hope you're all on crisis committees, even if you think it's an inconvenience. Thank you.
Thank you. In crisis management, and also for sharing with us what the impact of fraud can be, not just on a life, but also the economy of this country. And if you are indeed patriotic as Ugandans, then we should step up in terms of playing our roles in checking fraud, preventing fraud, and resolving fraud. I'll now move on to Susan, who I'll ask to share with us in terms of the unique challenges and the vulnerabilities. And we'll go to her area, which is mobile money, and ask you to share with us in terms of the sector, how fraud causes all these challenges and vulnerabilities. And then feel free, knowing the breakdown of the people that we have here, the different industries that they belong to, what we can learn from your own sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. I'll be as honest. We're talking about. Just to use my example, I came from the banking industry, and I was very skeptical about mobile money. I never used mobile money that much before lockdown. It's because of lockdown that we were forced, some of us, to use mobile money. And because of that, because it's a new industry, not many people understand it as much as they understand the traditional banking. And up to now, we still have the bulk of our customers who prefer to go to the banking hall because they want to interact with a person. So we have majority of our customers who have kind of not appreciated how mobile money works, even the technology itself, when it's coupled with high rates of illiteracy, and people are not tech savvy. So we have challenges where people are trusting other people to transact on their behalf. You find a gentleman sending a border with a PIN to the agent to transact on their behalf, and once this gentleman has finished transacting with for the customer, they transact for themselves and delete the message. So we actually have people who have been defrauded by their own children, by their own help, and by the people that they trust, because somehow probably we overtrust, but also we don't want to learn the technology that is involved with mobile money, so we kind of give away our rights. There is also advanced skill on the side of the fraudsters. They are always kind of ahead of us, or maybe they just get lucky, but sometimes they also have technology that is more advanced than we have. My former MD, he was called Mr. Ngwai, he said that we have to get it right every time. All the time we get it right. But the fraudster just has one opportunity to get it right, and he penetrates. So sometimes we realize that it's actually possible to commit a fraud or to transact this way once a fraud has already happened. So we always have to be on top of our game and make sure that we get it right the first time. We have some customers who still sell their KYC, you know, and I think this problem comes with the number of SIM cards we are allowed to hold. We can hold up to 20 SIM cards because we are 2 players, each player 10 SIM cards, and if there are 3-4, I guess you can have up to 40 SIM cards. So some customers would want to make a quick buck. They register a SIM card, they buy it at 2,000, register it under their KYC, and when they reach out, they get an offer for 10,000 or 20,000 shillings, and they sell this SIM card. These SIM cards are being used to commit fraud. And when we conduct investigations, we hit dead ends because you find this SIM card is under KYC of a lady in Chana Mukaka who is not possibly likely to commit a crime. So you end up with a dead end. And going back to the technology and information that we have on technology, our investigators also are kind of crippled. You visited police stations and CID, and you see how their offices are piled with files. So they don't interact much with technology. So when you bring a complex case, a fraud that has been perpetrated under mobile money, they don't understand even how, you know, e-money, electronic money moves from here to there, and how they can actually catch up with the fraudsters. So we end up getting frustrated because they are relying on the complainant's expertise. So whatever you tell them is what they go with. So there isn't so much help on that end. And when it comes to the judicial system, the judges are equally, you know, it's bizarre to them. They also have to be educated on how these things work. So you end up not really getting so much value. And we say that justice delayed is justice denied. These cases, because the investigations are also taking forever, they end up dragging on and on. They take 5 years. By the time this case is coming up for, maybe they're summoning witnesses. I'll give an example. Just last month, they summoned 3 of the directors in the company to appear and witness in a certain case. And one of them had already moved on to another country. He's now an MD in Tanzania. And so we had 2. So they adjourned. Now the date when they're supposed to go back, another director has resigned. So there is only 1 remaining. And by the time now it comes up for hearing, probably the other 3rd person would have resigned. And these are people who have personal conduct of these cases. These are people who understand the case in and out. So it becomes a bit of a challenge because it's taking so long, it's not ending, and by the time it comes up, it's not making sense anymore. some of these suspects have been granted bond or bail, and they have jumped it, they have moved on to other countries, and so we get defeated. We have dishonest customers, and someone calls a customer and says, you have won a car. There is a campaign that Airtel was conducting and you have won a car. So write this string. So they give you a string, *185, *9, blah, blah. Then they say, don't tell me your PIN. Put it in and say hash. So the customer has not participated in any campaign, but they're expecting to win a car. So they put this string, and it turns out it is a string, it's with a merchant code, and when you complete that string, the money goes to the fraudster. And by the time you realize, you see you have deposited such and such amount of money, the fraudster has already switched off the phone. So we have those are some of the challenges that we face. And for us, it's really to keep empowering our people, communicating with them, creating awareness, and to that effect, maybe if you can allow me, we are trying to see that we can use maybe 50% of the interest that we're earning on the trust accounts. Instead of paying to businesses, we can pay individual customers, and then 50% can go towards creating awareness and training and teaching our customers, empowering them to make sure that they don't fall victim of these crimes. We have on an annual basis, we have about 1,440 or more cases of fraud, and about 70% of those are a result of social engineering, or a customer has actually participated in that fraud by disclosing their PIN or not safeguarding their PIN and enabling the fraudsters to commit a crime on their phone. Thank you.
Thank you. Information non-stop with our customers, just to ensure that they are well armed and well prepared. For our fraudsters who always seem to be a step ahead, and therefore that causes them to succeed whenever they are trying to do what they do best. So I'll come back to Joseph and ask you to share with us or analyze the existing legal frameworks that underpin fraud, and just share with us how, as in-house counsel, we can play a more proactive role in enforcing the frameworks that are in place, and also advocating for necessary legal reform. As you know, reform always takes a bit of time, and we mostly see that the private sector is the one that takes the lead, and then the necessary reforms follow later. So over to you, Joseph.
Thank you, Anne. When you are analyzing the legal framework governing fraud in Uganda, you will realize that it seems to be sector specific. There is, of course, a general framework under the Penal Code Act, but it is not so specific on the kinds of frauds that we are seeing. In the Penal Code Act, you are seeing acts of deception relating to cheating, forgery, uttering false documents, and so on. But now when you take it down to the particular sectors, you find that there are specific laws. For example, the banking sector has got a number of laws. Of course, starting from the regulatory aspects, Bank of Uganda, the Financial Institutions Act, the Anti-Money Laundering Act, you've got the Data Protection Act. So you realize that these are dealing with specific aspects of fraud. It is also important to understand that the kinds of frauds that we are seeing, and it is good that we have someone here who was on the Committee for the National Payment System. When you look at the national payment system, there is a definition of an electronic device where they talk about a computer, they talk about a card, or a mobile device. That is an electronic device. And you need to put in place measures of how to utilize these particular devices. So people are likely to take over other people's identities, so you need to put in place data protection mechanisms. And we do have the Data Protection Act, whereby you have certain procedures of how you keep the data, how you release the data, and how you secure the data. You've got the Anti-Money Laundering Act, like we have said before, which is intended to put in place measures to ensure that people do not perpetuate illicit transactions. Then the Computer Misuse Act, of course, cybercrime, and so on. Now, the problem that we seem to be having is that most of the people for whom these laws are made do not understand them. In organizations, you need to bring these provisions at a granular level. You need to break them down. Like Alan said earlier, you need to develop particular policies. If you're dealing with issues of personal information, you need to have a policy on how that information is actually secured by the organization, how it is managed, who manages it, and how it is released. For example, I'm not expected to walk into a bank and ask customer information, what is the bank account of so and so and so. There must be certain procedures that have to be followed in order for that information to be released. Maybe I'll need a court order. If I'm working in the Financial Intelligence Authority, maybe, of course, the law allows me to ask for such information, but of course I have to prove that I'm asking for it for that particular purpose. Now, you'll also realize that the customers whom we intend to protect do not also understand this. And I will associate myself with Susan on the issue of customer education. Customers need to be made aware. The problem with fraud is that it manifests itself in many forms, and there are always new ways in which it is perpetuated. So you need to work together with the different regulatory organs, even in the absence of laws, at least to set up frameworks within which certain things can be managed, as maybe you wait for the legislative process to take place. Because a piece of legislation can take 2 years or even more when it is going through debates and so on. So working together with the regulators to come up with frameworks of, in which you can manage emerging instances of fraud is very important. Then in-house, you need to come up with particular policies that can align with the laws and regulatory frameworks that have been established at a national level. Then, of course, also the issues of governance are very important. Lobbying the people in power is also very important, because there are so many things that happen at a political level. People have other priorities, and yet you have urgent needs. You need to make your case to the people who are in power, the politicians and so on. Show them how this is hurting the economy, and show them the urgency. There are certain instances where laws have been passed in a quicker way because of the urgency that has actually been presented to the people who make these laws. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joseph. On that last bit, and hope no one quotes me, beyond showing anybody. To our online audience, I hope we're still together. We're going to get into the Q&A session later, so I'd like to request you to use the chat to type your questions now so that when we get to the Q&A, we'll be able to handle that aspect much faster. I'll move on to Lamek now and ask you to highlight for us the digital tools that can be used to enhance agility and effectiveness of when you're in a corporate crisis situation. And I want you to combine that with insights into the implementation of risk mitigation strategies for corporate entities using cutting-edge technology to prevent the kind of crisis situations or threats that have evolved over time. Over to you.
Okay. I don't know. Sorry, I have the COVID thing still. The digital kind of agitation earlier than it even happened. So the agility of corporates as enhanced by digitals. Right now, most of us, as we are here, you've heard some of our colleagues are logged in online. That's part of the digital kind of agenda that has brought about some bit of, I don't know which word to use, that has made life easier. I know for this conference, some of the people have been logging in out of here. So what it brought, the digital thing has brought things like Blue Jeans, Teams, and things like that. They have made life easy. And for COVID, when, like I said, the data forward, the next thing was how do we conduct business? How do we to some people, business is meetings, day in, day out. So, and we're not supposed to come into contact. That's one of the things. One of the things now that has taken on the corporates is data analytics. The world has embraced so much of machine learning and AI. And what does this bring to you? Data analysis. Because we are dealing with volumes, my sister from the telco would tell you, maybe they have millions of subscribers, but for them to like study the behavior, Joseph talked about studying behavior of people, transaction behavior, you need such kind of tools for you to be up to date, to be at the forefront of everything. You need to employ such things. And even then, more to that, we talked of crisis. So you need some incident management kind of software. If anything goes wrong, do you have systems can do for you analysis? How bad is this going to be? Can you do some prolations such that you know what resources to mobilize? Because if you have the data, it would easily inform you on what resources you need to mobilize. And then another thing, social media monitoring. You don't need to be clicking on everyone's social media platform. What has so and so said? You have these kind of machines and AI and everything that can monitor for you. Because we said one of the biggest problem that can break or make a company is the information flow. Someone can just put out a word and before you know, the whole house is on fire. So it is important that we can employ them in that. Then I talked about trainings, simulations. These technology can help us draw simulations into real life. If we are doing, like, say, our BCP, BIA, to do simulations such that we can use those to train the in-house people, such that we are prepared when anything were to happen. And then, right now, people are using cloud solutions. It's one of the new things on the block where you can access any information, your information, not anybody's information, any information that belongs to you anywhere, anyhow. However, all that said, they are threats. One of the things that moves with all these machines, all these innovations, is data. So there is a huge threat to data privacy. A huge threat. You know, you cannot have a company that has it all. You'll have integrators, you'll have very many other players that come to plug into you to make your deliverable very, very suitable for your customers. So if in the bank, somebody performs a transaction, like Joseph said, he performed a transaction, but then someone somewhere, he received a message. I believe it's not the bank that sent the message, it is some other company that sent the message. But how did the company know, yeah, this is Joseph with this account in this bank and he has done this? So there are very many integrators. So which means there is flow of information, and that flow of information can easily be made use of. Data privacy. And then also because of the very many layers, there are chances of cyber threats. So what does this mean? It means that our companies have, again, to invest into guarding themselves against these things. For every innovation you bring, then there is a counter kind of investment to guard against these threats. And then also it also comes with, because there are these high-tech innovations, there are very many complexities and integrations, they come at a cost. Some other thing that I've seen is that, and a big threat is that it has made we the people lazy. The machine will do it. It will spew out the data. So we have removed some bit of the human touch from what we do because we are so relying on this, and it's a big, big threat. When the system breaks down, even before your crisis management plans come into play and everything, there is already chaos. And by the time you recover, you're already in deep waters. So, and maybe, lastly, another threat is the system failures that I've just talked about. After people have abdicated their duty also to move along with the machines, if the same machines fail, then we'll be moving, I think, blindly. So we need, as we embrace the innovations and the ease with which they have brought, the ease with which they have made us do business, we have to be cognizant of the threats that can be very detrimental to the running of our businesses and everything that we have fought for and everything we put across. I submit.
Thank you, Lamek. I like the way you for a discussion on all those aspects within crisis management that we need to be alive to. I'll come back to you, Alan, and you've spoken about, you've given us some experiences already and some lessons from managing crisis in the industry in which you work. But I'd like you now perhaps to delve deeper into how we as legal teams can play a leading or supporting role. And you did mention that most of us are called in to do the cleanup after the deed is done, but how can we more proactively support our teams? But also when we come to cleanup, how do we support in crisis response matters, and also underscore for us the importance of timely and transparent communication with key stakeholders in crisis situations, and how do we support to manage the kind of risks that arise, such as reputational damage and so on. Over to you.
Thank you, Anne. It's space. So when I was hired as a lawyer, and they said, we have this number of cases, I want you to resolve them. Eventually, we started saying the best fight is the one you're not involved in. So we started measuring case avoidance. We said, when someone comes with a complaint, how do we ensure that 90% of the complaints do not become litigation? And then, of course, you save on legal fees. I don't think there are any external counsel here because we are taking their money. So when you have a crisis, I always ask that we move from being the lawyer who responds to being a strategic partner who can look at how the business is run and prevent any issues. For instance, we handle insurance. So whenever we look at our insurance claims, we started analyzing the number of accidents we have, and we started asking what is the correlation between the number of insurance claims, say for broken windscreens or accident cars, and the number of claims for workers' compensation, the number of claims for people who are injured, and we also asked what is the condition of work in the organization. So the one great attribute of lawyers is we are curious, and if you don't think it's a problem, it's a very important thing for your survival. So we always want to relate one set of data with another. So when we have to deal with crisis, over time, you will start seeing patterns. You will know, for instance, in Umeme, will know if we have this number of rotten poles, we should expect a pole to fall on a car or something. So we have to now deal with the company and say, we see these claims coming from this area, go and reinforce the network in this place. So you go into strategic partnership with the business to prevent a crisis. And that's when your real value is seen. If you're always the person who's going to solve a problem, first of all, our courts take 2 years, so no one will really know what you've done by the time you're done. And then once you're cleaning up, by then, no one is really in a good mood. So our goal as in-house counsel, we call ourselves the conscience of a company. Understand how your business runs, understand how every crisis arises. And if you look at the number of issues you've had, they usually start from a particular place. I'll give you an example. If people are complaining about billing, I always look at the meter, I look at our billing system, I look at how bills are printed, and you have to look at everything like that, but with the point of view of finding out where the origin of the problem is. So root cause analysis should be in among your tools. Secondly, you must, like I said, you must understand the business, and you must understand the players in the business, and then you must understand the stakeholders. Umeme is largely full of engineers and finance people. I'll give you an example. Half of our legal team is physically in the room. We're 3, so that means you have 6 people running a company with 3,000 people. Whenever there's a problem and it involves dealing with a person, they're more likely to send one of the lawyers, because the engineer knows how to talk to machines. He'll just annoy the customer. So the lawyer will come and you sweet talk him. You can even get him to do what you want, but you know how to deal with people. So I hope your people skills are up to scratch, because you will be called in to diffuse a crisis by using your words. And we are learning how to negotiate with customers, even when we're in the wrong. When the customer is in the wrong, you can't go and just tell him straight up, you're the wrong person. They'll think that you're arrogant. So to the question of how you handle crisis, the first thing is try and understand the business so that you can prevent the crisis, deal with the drivers, then handle the crisis by dealing with people and process. Now, on the technology side of it, it is always good to have technology that looks at your metrics. I don't know how many of you have a blank check for technology. I don't. Most companies are very slow to invest in technology for legal operations. But you can use Excel, you can use, the more rudimentary things. The good thing with lawyers is we're also very slow at adapting. Or we used to be. I'm going to speak for some of us who are not millennials. So we catch up with technology slowly, but eventually you will have to get there. So try and use what you have to analyze every ingredient, every driver, everything that leads to a dispute. Go back to the root cause. Try to prevent, especially if it's a process breach. Try to identify the problem and try to prevent it. You will find that everything you're doing is related. Every insurance claim has an issue with the way, say, your vehicles are maintained, and the way your staff are going to be in terms of safety. Every contract you've done helps the business run. So if you correlate everything you do to the way the business is operating, so don't just sit in your corner as a lawyer, you will be able to even detect a problem and help solve it. Then most times when you're called to solve a problem, it always helps that you know where the problem came from, how it will be. I once went to court and we were accusing someone of tampering with a meter. I was new in Umeme, so that's a caveat. So halfway through the case, our metering team came and said, oh, sorry, that thing we thought they had put in was a change that we made. So we had closed our case. The judge was just waiting to write a judgment. And then I found that we had a problem. I had to call and negotiate. They refused. We lost a lot of money. So also going back to the business and telling them, don't say we lost this case. Say we lost this money because of this action, which should have been prevented like this. Don't be shy about being the bad guy giving bad news. Go back to the business, tell them we could have avoided this crisis if you had followed the process. And most crisis comes from people not following the process or taking more risk than they should. So as lawyers, we're risk managers, we're the conscience of the business, we're also defenders of the business. But you cannot, you're better off defending something that you can prevent. So please try and get into that. And then communication, as lawyers, trust is very good currency. I hope your employers trust you. Always tell them the truth, but tell them in a way that is not too legalistic. If my bosses are accountants, I will always talk about how much money we have lost or how much money we have saved. Engineers, you talk about how efficiency can be increased. But for lawyers, we have to be very civil, of course, with each other. Don't fight everywhere, but be honest and be very clear about where this comes from. I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you very much. In terms of playing your advisory role to conduct a root cause analysis and understand the root cause of the problem, pick lessons from that and use that to again advise our colleagues in the different areas, business, engineering, and so on. But above all, people skills, which a lot of people will say we as lawyers lack. But people skills play a very big role in helping us do our job better. I'll come now to Susan, and probably this is the last set of questions, and I'll beg your indulgence. We should have closed at 9. However, we started just after 8, so we're trying to catch up with time and also, be able to release you to go to the next sessions that have already kicked off. So from Susan, in terms of the regulatory frameworks governing specifically mobile money, and of course, if you can, give relatable examples on how these frameworks influence fraud crisis management practices and how we as in-house counsel can stay ahead of these regulatory changes, and combine that with highlighting the innovative technologies and strategies that are being employed to combat fraud in your sector and how these can be applied to other sectors. Over to you.
Wow, Anne, that's a very pregnant question, but I will do my best. Okay, so Airtel Mobile Commerce Uganda Limited, most of you know us as Airtel. We've received a number of notices with, addressed to Airtel Uganda when you're actually demanding money from Airtel Mobile Commerce Uganda Limited. So we have a new law. It's relatively new, National Payment Systems Act of 2020 and the regulations of 2021. Under there we have the National Payment Systems agent regulations, we have the sandbox regulations, and now we have the consumer protection regulations. And the primary regulator here is Bank of Uganda. So under the National Payment Systems Act, under section 48, companies were required to separate mobile money from the GSM. GSM is the telecom company. So that's why we have Airtel Uganda and then Airtel Mobile Commerce or Airtel Money. Then we have MTN Uganda and MTN Momo. So that was the requirement. So Airtel Money, as you know it, is now Airtel Mobile Commerce Uganda Limited, or AMCOL in brief. Under the regulation or the direction of Bank of Uganda as a key regulator in this space and under the National Payment Systems regime, we're required to separate the money for the, first of all, we're required to create a trust fund to make sure that the money for customers is separated from the money of the entity and the two do not commingle. So we created trust, you create a trust and it has a corporate personality. We received a notice of corporate personality, meaning the trust fund is independent. We are required to have trustees, and we hired trustees indeed to make sure that they manage these trust funds and the trust funds are safe and not misused by the entity, which is Airtel Money. They conduct due diligence to make sure that the people who are taking care of these funds are fit and proper. And also on the trust accounts, we have a threshold. One bank cannot hold more than 20% of the money that belongs to customers. We do daily reconciliations on those accounts. So the money, which is the e-wallet, the e-value that you have on your wallet and the e-value we have in our system must reconcile with the value which is in the banks. We have transaction limits, and those transaction limits are to make sure that if someone is fraudulently pulling money from the bank, they do not hit us in one go. So you have those limits, and those limits have helped in making sure that they slow down the activities of the fraudsters. We have systems audits. We have the mandatory system audits. That is an annual one, but also as a company, we go over and above. We have internal audits. We also have external audits and also group audits. And that is really a proactive move to make sure that our systems are safe. We do stress tests and penetration tests to just check our systems and make sure that what I talked about earlier, sometimes the fraudsters get it right and you're like, oops, we didn't know that was possible. So you have to keep stress testing and penetrating into your system to make sure that you close all the gaps that could be there. Bank of Uganda has also required us of recent to verify customers at the point of transaction. So if you're transacting 1 million and above, initially it was for all customers and all transactions. However, through the lobbying and interacting with the central bank, they have now reduced the threshold or increased the threshold to 1 million shillings. So if you're depositing or withdrawing 1 million shillings, because of the risk, it's a risk-based approach, you're required to be verified. Now we are lobbying to say, can we drop the cash in? At least you verify on withdrawals, because that's where the biggest risk is. But we're still lobbying and we haven't, we're likely to succeed on that, yes. We have reports, a number of reports, and the reports that we make to the central bank as a way of off-site examination. Bank of Uganda looks at the reports. Our quarterly financials are checked. They are actually audited to make sure that everything is in place and we do not misuse customers' funds. But we also have a regime under Financial Intelligence Authority. We have the Anti-Money Laundering Act as amended and its regulations, and here we're required to verify, we're required to identify customers before doing any business with them. So that's where we collect the KYC and make sure that the people that we're dealing with, we actually know them. We're not dealing with people who are funding and with ongoing monitoring as well. So we make sure that we are not dealing with people who are financing terrorism, we are not dealing with people who are conducting anti-money laundering, we are not conducting business with fraudsters and all that. And where there is suspicion, we raise that suspicion to the Financial Intelligence Authority. And also all these frauds, by the way, are reported to the central bank as a requirement. Under the personal PDPO, Personal Data Protection Office, and under the regime of the Data Protection and Privacy Act and its regulation, customer consent should be sought before we share any information. And information like Lamek has mentioned, the information that we share across boards and on all these social media and technology, we don't know where that information ends actually. We don't know, even cloud, who owns cloud? I mean, who is there, who sees it? So we are very careful and we are regulated on how much information we share, should be for a purpose, and customer consent is sought before we share that information. Our systems are also certified by NITAU. NITAU checks the system on an annual basis and gives us a certification just to confirm to us that we are actually compliant with these systems. And if you're not compliant, then they can recommend some corrective measures. As a way of managing crisis, when something happens like a fraud, we report ourselves proactively. We report ourselves we disclose to Bank of Uganda, we disclose to FIA, and Bank of Uganda can decide to come on site. We conduct a forensic investigation. The communication and other things have been spoken about. So we conduct a forensic investigation and get the root cause analysis, do the root cause analysis. And once we have the RCA, then we share it with the central bank, and they decide if they are going to come on site to conduct their independent investigation. And once they do that, they can suggest a number of corrective measures. Some of the measures could be relieving some directors, board members, trustees, or management. It could be enhancing our controls. It could be withdrawing the license. It could be a number of things. So it can be anything, depending on the magnitude of the fraud or the situation. And you know that in the past 1 year, Bank of Uganda has actually withdrawn 2 licenses, including a PSO, a player. I think that was Pivot. So they can recommend any corrective action, and where they see that any corrective action is not possible, they will recall the license. As a company, Airtel, we have a number of strategies that we have put in place. First of all, technology. We have what we call the IMSI. IMSI is International Mobile, the S are forgotten, identity, subscriber identity. And it's an API that sits, it's a feature that sits on a SIM card. It sits on a SIM card, and once the SIM card has been replaced, then it notifies the bank. So this particular one we're giving to the bank, and it's free of charge. So we give you an API and you put it in your system. If someone switches a SIM card, that is SIM swap, it notifies the bank that this SIM card has been changed. And so you put a cooling period to wait for the customer to come, and maybe if he is not the one responsible, he can report the case, and then you safeguard the money, the funds. We have a security protocol in place. We have a center where people monitor the systems 24/7, and where there is a threat, then they take measures according to the nature of the threat. We also have AI. Someone has already mentioned the monitoring. with AI. We have AI in place that monitors transactions and the behavior of customers, and where that behavior kind of changes, there are a number of flags, over 40 flags, 40 indicators in place. So if one or two of those flags are triggered, then it now raises a flag which is investigated, and once it is confirmed, then we raise a suspicious transaction report with a Financial Intelligence Authority. As a way of strategy, apart from the system, we are trying to lobby, work with the government, the Bank of Uganda, to put in place a database where blacklisted customers can be stored, and any person planning to transact with those people. The problem is that we're working in silos. So a fraudster comes and hits Airtel, Airtel keeps quiet. Another one goes, the same actually goes and hits MTN, MTN keeps quiet. They hit Pegasus, Pegasus keeps quiet. So we're dying in our own movies somehow, everyone to their own problem. But if we could have a database and blacklist some of these customers based on NIN, it means that wherever he goes, even with banks, he cannot transact again, because the NIN will ping. The moment you put in his NIN, it pings, this is a blacklisted customer, and so by doing that, and together with educating the customers, if someone is not willing to share or sell their SIM card, then it means that people will be cautious, and we hope that this can reduce on the frauds. I think that is it. We also conduct a third-party risk assessment on the parties that we deal with. So someone mentioned aggregators, integrators. So many people tap into our systems, but we first have to conduct the assessment to make sure that their systems are fit to integrate with ours, so that they don't expose us, because many times actually these frauds are happening in banks, they're happening with aggregators, but what you hear is Airtel was hit, because the money eventually goes through the phone. So everyone thinks that it's actually, the fraud is actually in Airtel. So we also have to safeguard, because for reputational risk and all, we have to make sure that the people we deal with are safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Susan. And that mother and triplets are in good health. Thank you very much. I think we have to wrap it up here. And first of all, just please give a round of applause to our eminent panelists for unpacking, demystifying the topic before us. At our peak, we had 31 people on the link, and we thank you, our audience. And then we had 58 people following us on YouTube. Thank you very much. And of course, those of you who are physically, thank you for braving the morning cold and being here very early for our session. So it's 9:30. I'm very mindful of time. I don't believe we have more than the one question that I've been notified about online. There's just that one from Angela, and I hope she's still there, Angela Kirabwire. Susan has actually partially spoken to the question, which is, how are you engaging AI, artificial intelligence, in crisis management? And I believe you've just spoken to a bit of that as you close. So what I'll do now is give the opportunity to you, our physical audience. If we can just take 2 questions, one from a gentleman and one from a lady. In the absence of that, we can have both questions coming from one gender. And then, please introduce yourself and let us know to whom the question is directed as you ask it. Annabelle. By a show of hands, let me see so that we can just pick you out right away, and then, okay, so we have just one question. So over to you. 2 questions, and then that's it. Thank you.
So my question is in regards to crisis management. The panel has done a very good job demystifying risk and effectively managing it. But as we all know, you can't completely eliminate risk. You can manage it. So my question now delves into when you have actually had a breach. And for most entities, especially in this digital age, it's very likely that the breach or the fraud that has happened is going to make it to social media. So now you're faced with crisis management. As a corporate entity, you have a dedicated challenge of providing transparent and timely communications to your stakeholders, and you also have the need to protect your sensitive information that could potentially compromise your operations, your legal position. So my question is, how can corporate entities balance the need to be transparent and communicate with the need to protect their sensitive information? Any member of the panel. I know Lamek touched on the bit of crisis management, and I respect the fact that he broke down the different risk management tools. So maybe him, but any. Yeah.
Can I answer or wait for the second question?
We'll have both questions. We'll have both questions and then close it at that, and then have the responses at a go.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Fiona. I work in e-commerce technology. Mine is more of, I think, the gentleman from NSSF and Stanchart tried to tackle it, the digital tools. I don't know if it's secretive or what, but like what kind of softwares? I know as lawyers, we like a lot of paperwork, but from my experience, work is moving towards software and tools. We're working so closely now with tech teams. Just to hint, I don't have the kind of challenges that the mobile payments people have, but I know when you're dealing with bulk data, you use software tools to handle some of those challenges, and in any case, it gives you better response. We've been talking about responses. So what kind of software tools are your organizations doing? I don't know if those software tools are in the legal department, or you're sharing them across the functions, maybe internal audit, but what software tools are you using in your organizations? I would really appreciate if you could share that information. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Annabelle and Fiona. I believe Lamek will tackle both questions.
No, I think I'll let the NSSF or
You let Joseph deal with the second question on tools. Okay.
I'll deal with the one of crisis management and communication. You see, in every situation, we have a duty to communicate, but and there is a thin line. Yes, you have to protect, but again, what you communicate matters. When you decide to communicate lies, you're not making the situation any better. I mean, at sometimes, I don't know whether it's the lawyers who use this phrase or it's in the church. Sometimes they say the truth does what? Sets you free. I don't know whether it's a legal term or it's a biblical term. But you see, you have to balance what you reveal. But at the same time, it does not help you anywhere to tell lies. Because you just aggravate the situation, already a bad situation made worse. So yes, you have to communicate. The thin line of how much you have to because there's some information that cannot go into public domain, whether you want it or not. It is company, and I've seen disclaimers that have been put across by maybe spokespersons of companies who are saying, I'm not at liberty to reveal this. But that doesn't mean that even if you are not at liberty to reveal certain things, that you tell lies to get you temporarily off the hook, but not solving the problem. So I think it's very pertinent and important not to make already a bad situation worse, but at least giving information that is meant to make the situation a little better. I hope I've tried to answer you. Thanks.
I believe you have, but Alan will just top up.
Yeah, it's just I hope you all didn't panic too much at the beginning of the year when the minister said your meters would stop working in November. We've had a number of instances where you feel like you're just putting out fires everywhere, and the lawyers do this a lot. And I hope when there's a crisis, you're the calm people in the room. So we've had a number of instances, like earlier this year, the minister talked about how our meters security patch was going to expire in November. Now, people interpreted it a bit differently, thinking your meters would stop working. So what I noticed with what we did was the lawyers are always there to calm the situation. We're like, calm down, let's find a solution. So I hope you're always the calmest in the room. Then we decided, control the narrative. The media is out there, with social media especially, you will always have worst case scenario being put out there. So when it comes to to dealing with crisis, control the narrative, tell the story, but make sure that it is told in a way that is clearer, because panic always makes things worse than they really are. And then try to calm things down. Sometimes you'll find you spend more time calming down your own people than the public. So I've found that in our experience, we always decide, the first question is, what is the real story of what happened? Then you word it in a way that people will understand. Now sometimes you'll find our generators go down, like Simba once went down, and the generators wrote to us, they wrote to transmission, which wrote to us, they all have one client, Umeme has 2 million. Now it was our job to write and talk about how, and they use very engineering lingo. So they told us about how, the generators had some kind of false start, and I didn't understand it. So we are supposed to now translate it into English. So please make sure you write English and people understand you. So crisis management involves 1, figuring out what the truth is, 2, staying calm, 3, communicating properly, and then making some adjustmeds. Because when the minister made that statement about the meters, we had a timetable that was going till November. We actually brought the project forward till March. So we sped it up, applied for more resources. I think your tariff paid for it, so you paid a bit more in your fees, and then did the work quicker. And that means you have to be responsive when there's a crisis. Don't stay the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, software tools within NSSF, we've got a number of tools that are spread across different departments. I will start first of all with top, board level. We've got, for example, what they call the diligent board books. That one specifically is accessible to the board members and the people within the board secretariat. It is through that tool that they conduct their business. The board papers and other discussions are in there. Then we've got what they call the pension administration system. This one basically will deal with contributions, all that other data, how money comes in and so on. Within NSSF, we call it Octopus, but it is, that's the name we give it, but it is a pension administration system. You can simply call it PASS. In the human resources department, which we call people and culture, we've got the human capital information system, which we call HCIS. It captures the information of all staff members, the benefits payment, for example, salaries and so on, things to do with the payroll and so on. Those ones are captured in that particular system. Then we have got what we call the electronic documents records management system. That system is meant to make us paperless. Of course, for the legal department, it is not, we can't be 100% paperless. But through that system, we are able to receive and give instructions and even get approvals. It has embedded signatures and it has audit trails. Anyone who touches a document, of course, you have to have the access rights. There will be an audit trail showing who opened a particular document and so on. Then we have also got, of course, for the accountants, the JDE, the financial accounting tools that they use. That one is basically for the finance department. We have also got audit software. They use a particular type of software which will alert us to certain things that we haven't yet covered. Then we also have, in the investments department, they've also got a software that basically monitors the different kinds of investments that they're having. We have a plug-in to the Bloomberg terminal. We have a plug-in there, so they are able to monitor the investments within there. Then we have also got a property management system, a PMS. That one basically deals with our real estate portfolio. They're able to monitor different types of properties within there and what is happening to those properties. Then we have also got certain apps that have been developed. For example, on your mobile phone, you can download the NSSF Go app, where you can be able to see your statement, your contributions, and then you can also, of course, when they pass the voluntary regulations, you'll also be able to make contributions using that app, voluntary contributions, and also to make withdrawals in future using that app. The pension administration system can also help you. We have a way they have made it that you can log on to your computer and enroll as a member of NSSF. So, and then of course we also have the short codes. Those are *1256 and so on. We do have those for those people who are not able to use mobile phones, where they can transact in certain ways. So we have a number of tools, but they are spread across different departments. Within the legal department, living around the board secretariat, within the legal department, we are working with the IT department internally to develop an MI, a monitoring tool where we can easily be able to see the progress of assignments. So we have a live tool that will be projecting the assignments on a screen within the office, and you'll be able to tell who has taken long with a particular assignment and so on. Right now we are using a rudimentary tool. We have, of course, the Excel sheet and so on, but which is subject to data analytics in order to track our turnaround times and also identify where the problems that we have are. So we basically have tools, but they are dedicated to particular departments for particular purposes. Thank you.
Fiona, you just gave Joseph the opportunity to market NSSF. The good thing is that NSSF is not a competitor of any of us here. But thank you, Joseph, for doing justice. We're all contributors, or have been, and will continue to be as volunteers. So ladies and gentlemen, as we wind up, I'll just give Gaudius the opportunity to ask one last question, and then we shall wrap it up. Let us know who you're directing the question to.
Thank you, Anne. My question is to Lamek. Adaptability requires a resource envelope, and adaptability seems to be the only option available for all entities. Most of our companies in Africa are either small-scale entities or they are startups, where you find that the owner is the managing director, he's the board, he's the chief risk officer, he's the legal officer, etc. With this reality, what is the fate for the small entities, for the small-scale entities, and for these startups? And what can be done to ensure that they safeguard themselves from fraud and they better manage crisis? Thank you.
Thank you. The name is?
Gaudius.
Gaudius. I believe, and thanks for the question, I believe the kind of interventions that we make will so much depend on the size of the companies that we have. One of the things I think that is failing most entities, should I say Uganda or across Africa, is the way, the infrastructure that we put up, and the way we prepare ourselves for certain things. Whether you're small or big, certain things are going to happen to you. And there are certain things that you cannot negate or you cannot ignore. I hope I'm very clear there. A fraud will happen to you whether you're as big as Airtel or as small as a roadside kiosk or something like that. So there are certain things that are a must. You don't have to have the high tech that Airtel has, but you can deal with the means that you have. Right? So if, say, you're a roadside kiosk, and like, say, I've had very many times when mobile money people have been attacked and their money. So what do you do? What mitigants do you put? There are certain things you said, this I won't do, this I will do. There are those you choose to bite, and there are those you choose to leave on the table, depending on your size. So if you say, like, say the small ones, if you're a mobile money person, why do you have to always choose to close at 10 p.m. when you know that's when most robberies happen? So adjust. If you can't manage the high tech, adjust according to your might and your strength, and deal with situations, the threats that you have according to how strong you are. And that's, I think that's where the problem is, thinking that it's the big companies that can put in place this infrastructure. Like I've said, you don't have to be an Airtel or our, I don't know, should we call you our grandmother, how, Umeme or NSSF. Wherever you are, you're a company of your own, and you can put in place those mitigants that fit within your profile. So you don't have to just say pack and go home. Because if you say pack and go home, how are you going to survive? So it is the means that you have, and even your structure as in you, to do the things that fit within your mean. If you think you can't put up the strong firewalls for information and what, then don't go into that space until you're ready to go there. That's what I would, because at the end of the day, you're going to face litigations for misuse of data and things of that nature, which again will fold you and you go under. So I believe, like I said, work within your means and put the safeguards that are within the structure and size of your entity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lamek. Ladies and gentlemen, normally I would, at this point, give each of the panelists 1 minute to give their parting shots. And I think I should do that. Then we can wrap it up. So I'll start with my immediate neighbor to the left, and we'll move in that order. 1 minute just to tell us something you haven't already told us for key takeaways' sake, and then we close.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience. I usually worry about the 7:30 start. I think one thing from this that I would like to leave is work with what you have. In order to be critical in let's say fraud prevention, crisis management, crisis prevention, the legal function in your organization is critical. So 1, understand your business. 2, you might not always have the budget you need, but try and understand all the technology you have. If you use Microsoft, understand everything in Microsoft. And then 3, for technology, the one thing I learned is if there is something you do repeatedly, try and automate it. Don't spend too much time reinventing the wheel, drafting the same contract over and over again. And then lastly, understand the process of your business. I hope you read your annual reports, financials, understand where you are in the economy, understand people, and then understand that you are no longer the goalkeeper. You are on the front line of crisis management and prevention. And then please focus a lot more on prevention. You may not be able to prevent everything, but try to always understand. If that happens, you will be the trusted advisor and you will grow. I can guarantee it. Thank you very much.
I think one of the most important things that we see now is the issue of data security which is very crucial for every organization. And I think you need to properly negotiate software licensing agreements. As legal professionals, we should be involved in these negotiations. Put data security at the forefront. For example, there is talk of firewall authentications and so on. You know that many data breaches will arise from the outside. They are what they call man-in-the-middle attacks, so that when you are transacting, there is always someone who is intercepting whatever you're doing. So it is very important that we prioritize data security and that we support our organizations to make sure that our data has integrity. Thank you.
Fraud management is everyone's responsibility. So it's something that we cannot delegate to the audit team or the technology team. All of us are responsible. At a personal level, we just have to make sure that we secure our accounts, we secure our PIN, and information that can help the fraudsters to execute their transactions. So let's guard our accounts the way we guard the bank accounts, because sometimes we transact even more than the banks on the phone. But also in our capacity as in-house counsel, starting right from the contract, let's put the right clauses, have the right to audit, so that whenever you feel something is not right, as and when you need it, you can actually audit your partners. Also require an indemnity and have insurance in place in case something goes wrong with the partners and it affects your company, you can be able to get insurance. So let's take it with all the strength we have, and we make sure that we fight fraudsters. We make sure that we put a stop. We may not put a stop, but at least greatly mitigate and protect our companies. Thank you.
Being that I'm the only non-lawyer on the panel, I won't speak any legal word. I will just speak normal English. And we live in a changing world. As we sat here, from the time we sat here, very many things have changed. So we need to be reviewing all our processes and our safeguards every passing minute, rigorously and regularly. It would be so fatal and unfortunate for a failure to happen when your continuity plan has obsolete solutions. So with the changing technology and everything that is happening, we need to be revisiting those solutions we've put in place to safeguard us, such that we are ready for any failure and any crisis that can happen. Thank you, and I will borrow the same word. I submit.
Thank you very much, my panelists. Put your hands together for the panel. And of course, for you, the audience, thank you very much for being here at this breakfast. And I hope you're partaking of the breakfast, which is quite sumptuous. It would be an injustice if we left it behind and didn't consume it. We've come to the end. On my part, other than thanking yourselves, it is my sincere hope that we have picked some key lessons, particularly from the parting shots that our panelists have left us with, for us to go and just review and check ourselves on how we as in-house counsel are being effective in our roles when it comes to crisis management in this digital era. So as it is, I think it's very obvious that we need to give a bit more time to this in-house counsel breakfast. 1.5 hours does not give us enough time to engage and of course to network as well. You know, I'm surprised that external counsel are not here chasing after us. They're supposed to be here. We are not here to have a different kind of conversation with them. They should be here in the room trying to understand what we deal with as in-house counsel, because many times we go back to them to support us in different ways, either through litigation or advisory and things like that. And hopefully they'll take note. So we'll have to see how to give more time to these sessions going forward. As it is now, we're going to capture evidence that we're here. We'll start with the panel. We'll have a photo shoot together, and then we want the rest of you to also join us before you go away. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time, for being here, and we look forward to interacting with you in between now and the next in-house counsel breakfast. Let us not only meet once like this, but in between, let us engage on the matters that are emerging across our different practices. You did hear from Susan that entities are dying in their own movies. And this is how the fraudsters win. As bankers, where I work, we do have the Uganda Bankers Association. And when we had to deal with the challenges that we're dealing with, the message was share lessons learned, share information on the fraudsters. And of course, fraud cannot be perpetuated without internal involvement. I'm speaking about collusion. So when you collaborate, share that information about who is involved, you blacklist them, then it supports you in terms of how you're going to prevent any attacks that come through. So in your different sectors, find ways of collaborating. Yes, you're competitors, but there are points where you need to collaborate, and one of them is in fraud risk and cyber risk prevention. Thank you all very much. Let's now do the photo shoot and close it from here. Have a great day ahead.